Welcome everybody to PRO213. This is week 4. You made it to the final week of the course. Hopefully you've picked up some good tips and tricks as far as personal finance is concerned. I think this is one of the more important classes among the pro classes. All of them are important in their own right, obviously, but if you can figure out your personal finances, that will go a very long way for the rest of your life in helping you to have security and peace of mind. And one of the things that we often talk about when it comes to finance is that if your financial house is in order, if you've got your finances taken care of, if you're on top of your finances and are a good money manager, it tends to have a trickle-down effect to a lot of other aspects of your life. Relationships, your time, your balance in life, sometimes your health, just overall satisfaction, happiness. Not the amount of money, again, and we've talked about that quite a few times in this class, not the amount of income necessarily, but your ability to manage that money and the peace of mind that comes from being, having, once again, your financial house in order. So I would encourage you to make a few goals for yourself, make a few steps in the right direction, whether it be tracking like we talked about in week 1, whether it be a debt strategy of some kind like we talked about in week 2, whether it be some kind of overall planning like we'll talk about tonight. It was savings and things like that. We've got lots of different things, lots of different segments and mods that you could look at and take just a few pieces from. It might be overwhelming to do a lot, but even if you took just a couple things and move forward, you'd put yourself on a better track, and hopefully you'd revisit these things down the road. You make some baby steps in the right direction, then come back to it and make additional improvements. We all, no matter where we're at financially, can make some progress. We can take some steps in the right direction and improve our financial situation. So tonight's focus is savings. I, of course, as always, want to talk about a couple things that we've already covered, just kind of recap briefly here at the beginning. Then we'll spend a little bit of time on this week's assignment just to kind of clarify a few things and give you an example. And then we'll talk about different savings programs. So there's different articles that are assigned this week and the required reading. We'll talk some of the high points from that material, and as always, give you some different suggestions and ideas based on kind of the real world application of what we're talking about when it comes to savings programs. So we talked last time about debt, the importance of credit scores and your credit report. Just as a reminder, annualcreditreport.com. Annualcreditreport.com is a government regulated site that is forced to give us a full credit report once a year from each one of the 3 credit bureaus. Knowing your full credit report from each one of the bureaus is helpful. We need to make sure that there isn't incorrect information on our credit scores, on our credit reports. We need to make sure that our information is accurate, and that if there is something negative on there, that we fix it. If it's not accurate, then we get in touch and dispute it with the credit bureau. If it is accurate and we're doing something that's hurting our score, we know about it and we try to do whatever we can to correct the issue. And then in the end, be patient, because scores sometimes move quickly, but more often, especially when there's some negative things on our score or on our report, it takes a little bit more time. But scores and our credit report are so important when it comes to the interest that we pay. We talked about last week about how important it is to get the best interest rate possible. The difference between 1% or 2% as far as interest on a car or a home or even student loans, some kind of large purchase, makes a significant material difference to us financially. The difference of every percentage point on a mortgage, for example, might be a difference of $100 or $200 a month in expense on that mortgage. The difference between an extra % or 2 on a car might be the difference of $25 or $30 or even $50 a month in additional expense. And so those things all add up, and when you're trying to create a budget and try to live within your means and trying to save as much as you possibly can, those are just, extra interest because of a bad credit score is wasted money. When we have control usually of what our credit score is and how our credit report looks. And so I know we don't have total control, and there are different errors and situations and mistakes that we might have made, but we need to go in there, take ownership, get control of our score, make sure that we understand a report, try to remove bad things, things that are hurting us from that report, and then use a site potentially like Credit Karma, like we talked about, free site that just tracks your score, to really be on top of it and to take suggestions on ways that we can improve it. So that is a little bit about scores, reports, and interest. Of course, when it comes to debt, there's good and bad debt. We talk about good debt being things like a student loan, for example, that's a significant investment in your future. Many of you are in a situation where you have student loan debt. Some of you, it probably creates a lot of anxiety for you and frustration to have that student loan debt. As a financial planner or advisor, if I was helping you with your personal finances, I'd be telling you, relax. The student loan debt, we'll figure out a way to make sure and pay that. But get the most out of your education and make sure and use it as a legitimate stepping stone for promotion or for an additional opportunity. If you don't, then it isn't a great investment. If you do, and really do everything you can to work towards that end of, like I say, some kind of career advancement, promotion, or additional opportunity, then you'll have that expanded income that you need to be able to pay that loan back. If you need something to be able to commute from work and back, we got to have a car. Sometimes we're not able to pay cash for a car. I'd still suggest, and we talked about this last time, kind of the Dave Ramsey approach, where you buy a car that gets you from one place to another. You don't concern yourself with potentially making sure that you've got a new car, for example, or the nicest car or anything like that. Sometimes that can be a significant waste of money and a significant drain month to month on your cash flow. A good debt potentially is a living arrangement, a place where you have a roof over your head. You're not slave to a landlord of some kind. You're able to kind of control your own destiny when you own your own place. Having said that, some people are so excited and anxious to own their own place, they do so prematurely. So if you move to somewhere brand new and you've never lived in an area before, I would encourage you to rent for a year or two at least before looking to purchase, so that you understand the area, so that you can pick out a good location for you and your family, or even if it's just you, before I would purchase. So even if the market's good and prices are going up and you think, oh, I'm safe, markets can turn against us, real estate can go down, and so you don't want to be in a situation where you pick the wrong spot, you get stuck in a house, and then you need to go somewhere different and you're underwater, right? So be careful on home purchasing, but if that's the goal, and I think it's a great goal, make sure that you do your research, make sure you know exactly where you want to be, and also make sure you save some, for different things associated with moving. Even if you don't put a large down payment on the house, just that transition into a house can be fairly expensive. But as far as debt is concerned, mortgage debt, car loans potentially, and student loan debt can all be considered potentially good debt. If any debt is good, it's relatively good to have those kinds of debts. Bad debt could include payday loans, title loans, credit cards, pawn loans, the types of loans and debt that have high interest rates, that compound more often, and that get us in trouble as far as being able to keep up with our bills each month. And so, we want to minimize, obviously, where we can there and avoid those types of debt, if at all possible, completely. And then, of course, we talked about strategies for pay down. We talked about the snowball strategy, basically, of you pay the smallest one off, and then you take that payment that you were making and add it to your next largest debt and pay that one off as fast as you can. And then you get to a point, at some point, most people do, kind of the Dave Ramsey approach, is that at some point you get to a point where you're paying a lot of extra on your mortgage each month, right? Because you've paid everything else off and you've added all those payments together, and now you're putting them all against your mortgage, and it makes that mortgage go very, very quickly. And it probably will require some sacrifice, and it probably will require, being fairly frugal. But it's pretty inspiring when you listen into the radio shows, that Dave Ramsey puts on. It's pretty inspiring how fast individuals can get completely out of debt if they're willing to be disciplined, first of all, with their finances month to month, their inflows and outflows, the stuff we talked about in month one, tracking and making sure to live within your means, well within your means, and being very frugal. But once you've paid off your house and have no debt, then you're affording yourself the opportunity to live less frugal, right? So if someone were to ask Dave Ramsey, for example, what kind of car do you drive? What kind of house do you live in? What kinds of things do you and your family enjoy? You might think, well, he's a hypocrite because he's living pretty high at this point. And his response to that, I think, and I think I've heard him say as much, or at least allude to this, is that once you've paid off all your debt, then you afford yourself a lot more opportunities. It liberates you, and it gives you a lot more opportunities to do what you want, how you want to. Gives you an opportunity to live differently if you choose to. And you could live like I mentioned on the board last week. I mentioned, I think it was this course that I mentioned about Warren Buffett, who, lives well within his means, well below his means, even though he's a billionaire. He could spend $1 billion a year from today until he dies and never run out of money. He could spend $5 billion because he's in his 80s now. But anyway, the point is he could spend whatever he wanted to spend, but he keeps himself, he's paid himself $100,000 from his company for the last 25 years. He's lived within that, and he's lived in the same house for more than 50 years. He eats, breakfast sandwiches at McDonald's most every morning. So even though he's one of the wealthiest people in the entire world, and by most accounts the most successful investor of all time as far as investments in stocks and investment in companies, he still lives, you might not call 100,000 frugal, but relative to how much he's making, it's far less than what he has. So anyway, just a good example of living within your means. Even there's examples with the rich and famous, right? And there's a lot of bad examples. We could go through dozens of different NBA players, NFL players, pro baseball players, movie stars, musicians, folks who have made millions of dollars and then are bankrupt. And it's because they never fully understood the concept of trying to live within your means and prepare for the future. And so when the money's good, they live high. In fact, some of them live beyond their means, even when they're making millions of dollars. And then as soon as that starts to dry up or changes in any way, they run out of money and go bankrupt. So just an interesting case study in life, right? When you read People magazine or when you read a newspaper, and maybe none of you guys pay attention to that kind of stuff, but CNBC, that does a lot of articles on investments and financial planning that I read articles from almost every day, they oftentimes will point out different people that are very popular folks who have made lots and lots of money, and now financially can't even pay their mortgage, can't even pay for the cars that they have or the insurance on the different things that they have, and lose everything because they weren't able to live within their means and budget and do the basic things that we've been talking about in this class. And the reason I keep bringing that up is because oftentimes the thought process that happens within a course like this is that I've got people who will say to themselves, well, if I made more money, then I would do all the stuff that we're talking about. I'd be good about my debt. I'd budget. I'd do all these different things that we're supposed to do. I'd save for the future. And what I would say is probably not, actually. It doesn't usually switch. It's not like a switch on the wall. All of a sudden you're making more money, and so you do everything right with your money. The people who do things right with their money probably did it right with their money before they had money. I don't know if that makes sense, but one of the things that I hope that you learned from your interviews this last week is that most people, high income or low income, if they're good money managers, it's something that they put in patterns, they put in habits and patterns in place before potentially they had as much money, before they started making better money, before maybe they had an inheritance or a business sale or something like that. And so when that windfall event happened, or when they started getting more money, they already had good systems and patterns and habits in order to manage that money, and didn't have a situation like a lot of pro athletes and a lot of musicians have, famous people, actors, where they lose everything because they just have never ever understood how to manage what they have. All right, enough on that. So we've talked a lot about tips in this class. We've talked a lot about ways to track things, automate things, making sure to discern between needs and wants. Even if the only thing that happened in this class is that you automated some of your savings or some of your debt pay down, or you started to track some of your different things that you're doing, or you evaluated maybe with a spouse or family member or partner, whatever the situation is for your financial household, you evaluated with them the difference between needs and wants and ways that you could maybe scale back on wants, or prepare by saving proactively for those wants instead of using credit cards or debt to accomplish those wants, like a vacation or a car or something like that. Those would all be, again, material changes to your financial lives if you take some of those things and accomplish them. There were some tips, lots of different tips on money management that are readily available all over the internet. Even if you were just to put tips on money management, I just did a Google search a few weeks ago, and there were 2 different sites that had 50 different tips each on money management. And if you were to look through a list like that or take a class like this, there's going to be at least a handful, at least a couple that you could, no matter how good you're doing, you could take and make improvements with your finances because of those tips. Even if you're just focused on them and write down some goals and try to stay disciplined or diligent about those goals, you'd be you'd be making improvements, and that'd be a great place to be. Hopefully, the interview went well last week. I haven't graded all the discussions. I've seen some of those interviews. Some of them looked really good. I will say that I hope that inspires you to ask more. Instead of having to have an assignment like this, to ask somebody about the kinds of things that work well for them financially. I hope that you'll find people in your lives that you can ask questions, and that you can be comfortable enough to ask for their advice, and that they'll ask for your advice, and that it'll be a good positive relationship that way. And finances, are one of those areas where we can all learn from each other. Different people have different experiences. They know what to avoid or what to do, what not to do. And so there's a lot of things we can learn from each other. I hope that you'll continue that dialogue with both the person that you already interviewed, but maybe other people, and expand the group of people who's trying to look out for you and give you advice. And most people really appreciate the opportunity to give advice and to share experience and to try to help in any way they can. Advice being free help, right? Sometimes people aren't as anxious to give us something, but they're very willing to give us their perspective or what they think they know. And when it comes to finances, I think it's not that you need to follow everybody's advice, but it is a great opportunity to get different people's opinions and grow from them. All right, let's talk a little bit about this week's discussion. It's the last discussion. Of course, the only other thing that you have this week is your career integration quiz, is what they call it, but it's just basically 15 points for answering a few short questions, 3 questions about the course. Hopefully you'll give us some good feedback and think, be a little bit more thoughtful about, the kinds of suggestions and positive feedback that might be helpful for a class like this. Of course, this week you'll have an opportunity to give negative feedback as well, but in an anonymous way, through the course evaluations that you'll get. But use the career integration quiz as more of a place to help us understand what things work well in a course like this, so we can continue with those things, and then we'll use the evaluations to try to assess ways that we can improve. And hopefully you use that as an opportunity to give constructive criticism if there is something that you feel needs to be shared or changed. But as far as the PowerPoint, so other than the career integration, and other than daily checkpoints for a few more days here, you've just got this discussion board, and the assignment calls for 2 content pages with 50 speaker notes each in a PowerPoint. And the PowerPoint topic is savings options, and feedback and research on savings, and different savings programs, different savings options. And so hopefully you'll find it a good opportunity to both create a PowerPoint, which is always good practice, because you're going to use PowerPoint throughout the rest of your lives, either within most every single workplace people are using or interpreting PowerPoints. But also, and perhaps more than that, an opportunity to think through and be thoughtful about the options that you have from a savings standpoint. And I wanted to, of course, you've got some responses that you need to do. Make sure and go back through weeks 1 through 3 this week. A good opportunity to go back and make sure you've got all the required posts for each and every week. And of course, any week that you don't get full credit, it's, that's a good indicator in some weeks that you were either late or didn't get all the response posts that were necessary. And so go back and fill in some more response posts. Get those done. I'll give you some additional points if you'll do that. And so I'd strongly encourage you to go back and make sure you've got those completed. All right. So let's, though, show you an example for this week. So as I mentioned, this week the assignment is to make a 2-page PowerPoint. And when we talk about a 2-page PowerPoint, and I don't know that I need to mention this, but it seems like every class I teach 213, somebody will do a PowerPoint that just has a title page and then one subject page. And when we're asked for like 2 pages for an assignment or writing assignment, or when we're asked for a 2-page PowerPoint, the title page doesn't count towards that requirement. So just keep that in mind. I'm sure most of you assume that, but I just don't want to dock anybody for not meeting the minimum expectation of this assignment, which is 2 content pages of a PowerPoint. So most of you will have a 3-page PowerPoint, the first page just being, the title page, of course. All right. So what I wanted to show you is the speaker notes and an example of the speaker notes. And so I've posted this on the discussion board for your review as well. So if you have questions about how to put in speaker notes, I would strongly encourage you to refer to this example. And the reason I would have you refer to it is that a lot of people, when we say put in notes, speaker notes, they just put it in the body of the actual slide. And if you've ever been in a class or course where the professor, maybe it's this course, but where the professor has slides that have too much writing on them, it becomes difficult to pay attention and get something from the slides when there's too much writing, because everybody starts just reading the slides, right? Presenter notes or speaker notes are meant to be for the person who's presenting the PowerPoint, not for the people who are reading the PowerPoint or looking at the PowerPoint, but for the person who's actually presenting and what they're going to talk about, on those particular slides. So here's an example. I bullet point some different savings options. This is, of course, relevant to the material that we want to learn about this week, but if I were to research some different savings options, I might have the following. I might have CDs as a savings option, savings accounts, and mutual funds. And so if I'm presenting this PowerPoint, I might say something effective. CDs, can be a great option for people who want a little bit higher interest, still want FDIC protection, but can tie up the money for 1 to 5 years for a little bit more interest than a savings account. And a savings account is great for somebody who needs liquidity, who wants their account to be liquid, but also perfectly safe in the format of FDIC insurance again. Although having perfect liquidity and safety means that we probably won't get much interest, and that's absolutely the case at this point. Savings accounts are the lowest rate as far as the yield or return that we'll get between the 3 options that we're talking about here. And then mutual funds can be a good option for somebody who wants liquidity, because they are liquid. They can be sold at any time. So they are liquid, but somebody who is not as concerned about safety, 100% safety of principal, and is trying to get additional returns. So among the 3 options, mutual funds have the best potential for return. Okay, so those were my notes if I was presenting these 3 options, and you can see if you look at the bottom of the page that I've got those notes written down, okay? The notes that I would have discussed if I was presenting these slides. So again, these notes are not for the recipient of the presentation, but for the person presenting, and it's so that they can keep their thoughts together as they present. It's kind of like the cards, the 3x5 note cards, when we used to give presentations back in the olden days and write out some notes on 3x5 cards. These days, you're usually always going to be in front of a PowerPoint, so you can put your notes right there, right on them. You can actually, there are ways with different systems where you can present what you all see as the recipients can be the slides, right? I can expand the slides to be full screen, and then still have the ability on my system to see the notes if I'm presenting from a laptop or a computer, or I could just print out my speaker notes, whatever works best. Okay, so speaker notes don't go in the body, they go in the part on the bottom called notes. Does everybody see this down here? I wish somebody was here to be able to see this, but there's that notes tab on the bottom. Okay, if you don't see a line where you can write in notes, you just push notes and it will pop up so that you can write something in. And then finally, because we're talking about savings today, here's another example of a slide, a body slide that has the word count needed, right, for the requirement. But again, it's in the notes section. It's not in the body of the slide. The slide just has some bullet points or a picture or a little, GIF or whatever you're trying to do with the body of the slide, but not all your speaker notes. Your speaker notes are under notes on the bottom. So again, because it's the topic that we're actually learning about, if I were looking to save in a savings account, CD, or mutual fund, like we learned about on the prior page, which are all good, potentially good savings options, there are different institutions that I can invest with. So here's some random examples. A big bank, a small credit union, an online bank, or an online broker. And I've given you an example of each of them. Chase Bank is a big bank, right? Nationwide, large bank. UCCU is an example of a credit union here locally in Utah County. Ally Bank is an example of a large online bank that does a lot of advertising. And Fidelity is one of the largest brokers in the world. And primarily people use Fidelity online and do-it-yourself platform, but you've probably seen Fidelity offices as well, but I put it down primarily as an online option because most people use Fidelity online through their online systems, through their website. So, and it's just a preference thing. Some people will use a combination of all these different institutions. Some people will just, prefer to have one of them for their savings programs, and that's fine. So, what I've written in my speaker notes is that, sometimes the big bank has good technology and good security and good capability, different things that they can do, where a credit union might not have those things, but they might pay you a little bit higher interest on your savings account or CD. And you might get more personalized or better service from the credit union than you do from a big national bank. The online banks might pay you even a little bit more interest than the first two that I've mentioned because they don't have brick and mortar buildings that are expensive and lots of employees, which are expensive. And so sometimes they can pay us a higher interest rate. That is the case right now with their savings programs within banks like American Express Bank, Ally Bank, Synchrony Bank. These are all different online banks that pay a little bit higher savings rate. They're FDIC insured still, so they're still safe. And for people who are comfortable doing online banking, and doing banking through the computer, these are great options. And then finally, there's Fidelity, Fidelity.com, a great option for mutual funds, if that's an option that you want to do. But they also have CDs and savings products as well. They're just not as known for that, but they still have those products as well. So different reasons, different pros and cons of each. Some people like a combination of them, as I mentioned. Some people will just go to one of them and not worry about having multiple things, multiple places. But I wanted to give you an example of different institution types for savings because there's a lot of different ways that you can do it. There's no one right answer. It just has to do with what you're comfortable with, what you want to do, what you're trying to accomplish, and what types of products you're trying to use. Because these different places all have different products that they do really well, and then some products that they don't even do. For example, Ally Bank's not going to have mutual funds for you. Some big banks and some credit unions will have mutual funds through investment companies that either they own or that are affiliated with their companies. Fidelity has, as I mentioned, is more known for the mutual fund side, but also has some banking products. So they all have different mixtures of different products, and it's worth at least checking. If you're starting a savings program or looking to tune up your savings program and the options that you're using, I would consider any one of all four. They're good. They're good methods for saving. It's just more about personal preference in the products that you're using as far as which one might be better for you. Okay. Primary purpose, though, of these slides that I just showed you is not the material itself, although, it's helpful material. But more importantly, it was to discuss, what the requirement is this week, which is that you need at least two content slides. And then you also need speaker notes, which you put in the notes section, not on the actual slide itself. Okay? All right, so back to our PowerPoint for the course tonight. So any questions on that, let me know. Zip me a quick email. Whatever you'd like to do to get in touch, text, call, email, whatever works, so that we can discuss if you're getting caught or hung up in some way for this week's discussion board. If you've already done the discussion board and feel like you need to revamp your PowerPoint, you're welcome to, of course. There won't be any deduction if you submit something and then edit it, right, and resubmit before the due date, so don't worry about that. All right, so that's what we wanted to talk about for this week's discussion board. Now we wanted to visit a little bit about some of the highlights of some of the material or content from the required reading. And one of the websites that the required material points you to is saveandinvest.org. And the saveandinvest.org article for this week is really focused on different ways or options you can save. And so it expands on, kind of this idea that we've already been talking about, that there are different ways to save. There's no one right answer. And there are lots of different opportunities out there. So for example, saveandinvest.org talks about retirement plans. They talk about different types of retirement plans, and then they talk about non-retirement plans. And there are a lot of each. So a lot of people, when they think about retirement plans, they think only of 401ks through work, and that's it. But there are lots of other types of work retirement plans, like pension plans, cash purchase plans, profit sharing plans, SEP IRAs, simple IRAs. Those are all different types of employer retirement plans. And then there are individual retirement accounts that we can open that are tax efficient as well, like regular or traditional IRAs, and then Roth IRAs. Very different from a tax planning standpoint, but both tax advantaged. And so talks a little bit about the difference between a Roth and a regular or traditional IRA. When you just hear somebody say IRA, they're usually referring to a regular or traditional IRA, which is an IRA that you get an upfront deduction for when you put it in. That's a tax deduction that you get. So if I put $5,000 into my IRA this year, and it's a regular IRA, I will get a $5,000 deduction from my income. So if I make $50,000 this year and I put $5,000 in an IRA, I'm only going to be taxed, and this is an oversimplified generalization, but I would only be taxed on $45,000 because I made 50, but I put 5 into a regular IRA or traditional IRA, and so I'm only taxed on 45. So a lot of people use IRAs and 401ks as a way to get tax deductions, income deductions, so that they pay less in tax. Can be a very good way of tax planning and reducing taxation each year, contributing to an IRA or contributing to a 401k. Now, there's also the Roth, though, or the Roth IRA. A Roth or a Roth IRA is another type of individual retirement account. But instead of getting an upfront deduction on a Roth IRA, you don't get any deduction up front. And people might say, well, why would you do it then? No tax benefit now. It's because you get a significant tax benefit later in a Roth IRA. And that tax benefit is that the money grows tax deferred. And then when you pull all that money out in retirement, you're not taxed on any of it in a Roth IRA. So in a regular IRA or 401k, when you get to retirement, you're going to pull that money out and it's all going to be income taxable. You've deferred the taxation, but when you go to pull it out in retirement, you're going to have to pay the taxes. You're going to have to pay the income taxes. That tax deferral and deduction is very valuable, but a lot of people get to retirement and they're frustrated by the fact that they have to pull money out of their IRAs and it's fully taxable. Roth IRAs, however, you don't get an upfront deduction, but you grow the money over, however long you grow the money in your investment accounts in your Roth IRA. And then when you go to pull it out, you pay no tax. There's no tax whatsoever due on a Roth IRA as long as you wait till retirement and as long as it truly is a Roth IRA. Now, you might say, well, this sounds like a big loophole for the rich to put a bunch of money in a Roth IRA so they don't have to pay any taxes in retirement. And the answer is it would be, but there are a lot of restrictions and rules on Roth IRAs that don't allow the rich to get all their money into a Roth. For example, in any given calendar year, you can only put up to $5,500 into a Roth IRA. unless it's a Roth 401k, but that's a different, but the point is, in a regular Roth IRA, you can only get $5,500 or up to $6,500 if you're over 50. Now, having said that, you can take a regular 401k or IRA that you have, and if you're willing to pay the tax in this year, you're able to convert it over to a Roth IRA. And so a lot of people will do that, pay the taxes, and give themselves an opportunity to have a Roth. In addition, there's a restriction on Roth IRAs that says basically for a married household, so if you're part of a married household and you make over about $195,000, you cannot participate in contributing to a Roth IRA. Okay, you still might be able to contribute to a Roth 401k, but not a Roth IRA. So the Roth account and the traditional IRA account were never meant to be a tax advantage for the rich. It's always meant to be more of a tax advantage for the middle class. And it's been a highly successful program for, decades now here in the United States to have these IRA accounts that people can add to and add for their retirement. And because there's tax benefits, it motivates more people to do it. And why is the government motivated to help us help ourselves for retirement? Well, the reason is, first of all, it takes pressure off social programs that exist. So welfare and Medicaid are two significant programs that end up paying for a lot of things that happen with individuals in retirement. So if somebody can't live off Social Security alone, which if you have a mortgage and a car payment, Social Security is not enough for most people to be able to live comfortably. Well, if you can't live comfortably and you're below the poverty line because all you've got is Social Security, you're going to have access to Medicaid, in addition to Medicare, which everybody has access to after 65. But you'll have access to Medicaid, which is a social program, and then you'll also have access to welfare. And the combination of welfare and Medicaid in retirement can be substantial as far as the cost to government. So if they can promote retirement planning and tax benefits of retirement planning and motivate people to prepare for themselves instead of relying on the government when they get to retirement, they take a lot of pressure off themselves. Speaking of the government, they take a lot of pressure off themselves by motivating people to plan for retirement. So again, IRAs, both Roth and regular, the program itself to create a tax shelter, a tax benefit for people saving for retirement has been highly successful in this country and has taken a lot of pressure off government programs for retirees, and even though there's still substantial pressure there. But it's been something that other countries around the world have tried to mimic in different ways because it's great to have people motivated to try to help themselves, right? Anything you can do to try to get people to where they're self-sufficient, instead of relying on government or relying on anybody else, for their well-being is probably a positive, probably a good idea, probably a good program. All right. So that is the Roth IRA and the regular IRA. Again, regular IRAs or just IRAs are upfront tax deduction, totally tax deferred throughout, your growing period, and then completely 100% income taxable in retirement. Roth IRAs, there are no upfront deductions, but they grow, they're tax deferred, and then they come out 100% tax free. So they're basically the opposite of each other from a tax planning standpoint. Having said that, you can put anything you want in a Roth IRA or regular IRA within pretty broad rules. So there are pretty broad rules on what you can and can't put in a Roth or regular IRA. You can put real estate in IRAs. You can put gold and silver in IRAs. You can put mutual funds, stocks, bonds, cash, CDs. You can put a lot of different investment types in Roth and regular IRAs, but most of which have to be regulated or at least be able to be trackable, in some way. But there's quite a bit of flexibility on what you can and can't put in an IRA. Then, of course, this article talks about non-retirement savings and investing programs. A lot of times we get caught up in thinking, and my clients get caught up in thinking, that pretty much if they're going to invest long-term, it's always going to be in a retirement account. Well, a lot of people either can't use retirement accounts because of the different restrictions we've already talked about, or they don't want to use retirement accounts exclusively. So at some level, retirement accounts are very helpful, especially if your employer offers a match. But the tax deferral and the tax benefits of most retirement plans are good enough that you should at least consider participating. Beyond that, though, there are lots of other options that are well worth your time to explore and to consider. A lot of people use CDs, right? Certificates of deposit through banks. We talked about them a little bit earlier. They pay a little bit better interest than a savings account or a money market, but you do tie up your money for some time, which is sometimes great, sometimes fine. Of course, savings accounts, which right now under the current environment don't pay hardly anything. The national average for a savings account right now in the United States within a large bank is 0.3%. So you're getting a 0.3% yield on average. Now, there are some of these online banks like Ally and Synchrony that are closer to 1%. There's some banks and credit unions that are, more aggressive about paying a little bit higher interest. But the national average, there are some that pay higher and lower, but the national average is 0.3. So 0.3% would take you about 25 years, okay? It would actually take you 250 years to double your money, okay? So it would take more than 2 lifetimes to double your money at 0.3%. If you were getting 3%, it would take you closer to 25 years. If you were getting 7% or 7.2%, rule of 72 would tell you that you're going to double your money every 10 years. So the difference between getting an average of 7% in the stock market and doubling your money every 10 years and being in a savings account at 0.3% and doubling every 250 years is a pretty big difference, right? Pretty wide gap between the two as far as growth. But savings accounts have their reason. We want to get a little bit of interest, but sometimes we want our money perfectly safe and liquid. And when it comes to emergency reserves, we always want those emergency reserves somewhere like a savings account where we can get at the money without any restrictions. We never have to worry about it losing or going down, and it's always safe and secure and insured. So there's definitely a place for savings accounts, but just be careful that you're not trying to grow your money too well in a savings account or have the expectation that you're going to grow your money in a savings account, because right now rates are very, very low. Now in the future, rates could go up, and that could be different, but right now, getting a savings rate at 0.3 is not going to grow your money very quickly, that's for sure. Of course, you've got real estate property, you've got commercial property, residential property, apartments, you've got raw land, you've got all kinds of ways that you can invest in property. You've got all kinds of ways that you can invest in metals like gold, silver, platinum, palladium. There's all kinds of different metals. There's business interests that you could invest in. There are cryptocurrencies now like Bitcoin. There's all kinds of different things that you could potentially invest in, some of which are more speculative and aggressive and risky than others. So I'd be very careful that just because I've listed them here on the paper does not mean that they're all going to be foolproof, safe ways of growing your money. Remember, there's a risk-reward trade-off at all times when it comes to investing. The more reward you expect or are promised on an investment, there should be more risk. So if I'm getting told that I could get 8% in a very safe investment in one place, and then the bank's telling me in a very safe investment, the savings account I'm going to get 0.3%, I have to assume that the savings account getting 0.3 has far less risk than the 8% that somebody is promising me, or they would be closer to the same. Why would somebody in their right mind, okay, this is just how markets work, why would somebody in their right mind pay us 8% when somebody out there is willing to pay 0.5 for a little bit more risk than a savings account? So just keep that in mind when you're dealing with one product to another, one opportunity to another. The age-old adage, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. So basically, if it's too good to be true, if it sounds just amazing, it might be smoke and mirrors. It might be fraud. It might be a scam. It might be somebody that is just really ignorant. So they might be the most honest person in the world, but they might be just very ignorant about what the opportunity that they're trying to pitch really is all about. So I'd be very, very careful about high return promises from anywhere, or promises of safety or conservative options that also pay high returns. That's not a mix that's congruent or realistic when it comes to investing. The higher the return, the more up and down risk or more default risk is going to be associated with what we do, okay, as far as investing. But lots of non-retirement offerings out there, and I would encourage you not that you need to do all of them, but just I'd consider you to learn more about some of them. And if I've got a retirement plan through work, I think it's a great idea. I think it's advisable to consider having a non-retirement plan of some kind where I consistently save a little bit each month into that plan as well. So I've got something in retirement, but I've got something out of retirement that still is my long-term planning, but can be complementary from a tax planning standpoint down the road. All right, so one of the things in saveandinvest.org is it's got a whole tab of different calculators, and of course one of the calculators that is helpful when it comes to a savings program or savings goals is just knowing how much I need to invest to hit a certain goal. So historically, a lot of people were interested in seeing how much do I have to save and what kind of return do I need to get to $1 million. A lot of people thought, especially our parents and grandparents, that if they got to $1 million, they had made it, and that life would be easy, and they'd have a wonderful retirement. They could retire. There's something about being called a millionaire. It's a big status symbol. And then, through the real estate bubble in 2002 through 2007, there were a lot of overnight millionaires based on the property, just their house, right? And then, of course, after it crashed, then it's kind of a reality check. But the point that I'm trying to make is that $1 million doesn't go as far today and won't go as far 20, 30, 50 years from now, maybe when some of you retire, as it does now. We might have to have a bigger goal than that. It's a great starting place, but we might need a bigger goal than that to live comfortably in retirement. But there are different calculators. I would encourage you to kind of play around with them, put in some different scenarios. It makes it very easy. It's a lot easier than trying to come up with your own equation in Excel for the future value of money or the time value of money problems. And all of you will probably have a finance class where you have to do time value of money and figure out FV and PV and the rate and all those different things. But these inputs that these different websites put together, like Bankrate, like Credit Karma, like Fidelity, like all these different financial websites, these different calculators are, I think, very, very helpful, and I think have a lot to offer as far as helping us to understand how much to invest and how to make goals when it comes to our savings. Okay. Also has a segment on fraud, and we've talked a little bit about this. Each and every state has a division of securities, and each and every state's division of securities website will have a list of different fraud that their state is probably dealing with, different cases that they've recently tried within their state for fraud. A lot of different Ponzi schemes out there, a lot of different just shysters, just people who are trying to take money and trying to take an easy way, and just convince people to give them money so that they can invest in something that they never do. They just take the money and run. So it speaks to, why it's important to make sure and check the people that you're investing in or investing with. Check the products, understand them as the best you can. If you don't understand them, if anything doesn't feel right, back away, step away, walk away. Don't do anything that you don't feel like you don't have to completely understand, but you feel comfortable and understand. And again, if something sounds too good, walk away, because most times those are the things that can get us in trouble and end up, we end up investing in something that we'll never see our money again because it was too good to be true and somebody's just taken our money and run. All right, so that's kind of a negative when it comes to investing. How do you know something's legitimate? Well, go to legitimate sites. Talk to more than one person. If somebody's trying to sell you something, ask them for references. Ask them for people who have actually done it. Go talk to other people about their opinions. Talk to people who have experience with investing, about the opportunities that you're looking at. Don't let anybody convince you that there's some secret way of quick money, of making quick money or quick returns. There are no secrets to it. There are wonderful opportunities once in a while that have phenomenal returns, absolutely, but those are not secret things. They're public things, that are regulated and that we have opportunities to invest in. And if you're willing to take the risk, sometimes we'll have incredibly good returns. But these opportunities where they say, hey, let's be hush-hush about it, this is a uniquely good opportunity. I don't want to let anybody else in on it. I'm just going to let you know about it because I like you and we're getting along really well. That kind of line usually ends up being somebody, defrauding somebody else. So just be careful. And like I say, if it doesn't smell right, if it doesn't look right, if it doesn't sound like right, walk away. If you're really excited about something, it sounds wonderful, just ask a few other people. Make sure that you get some feedback from some other people. And if they're a little bit skeptical, yeah, be skeptical. Because sometimes when people are skeptical, we think, oh, you're just skeptical because you don't want me to, succeed. You don't want me to take advantage of this phenomenal once in a lifetime opportunity. When reality is, no, it's just people who have had experience with different fraudsters just become skeptical, and you just have to be careful. If you understand it, feel good about it, you've asked other people, sometimes, the risk taking that you can take, even if it is a substantial risk, can be the best thing that you ever do. Business owners that take the risk of starting their own businesses and putting everything into it they possibly can, sometimes come out with the very best returns of any other kind of investment you could possibly make. So it's not risk by itself that's bad. It's just when we don't understand it and end up falling for somebody who's not really even giving us a legitimate opportunity to grow our money. That's where the fraud piece comes in. And then, of course, we have opportunities for education savings like 529 plans, which are wonderful state-by-state run and administered plans for saving for college education for our children, our grandchildren, even for ourselves. If we know that we're going to incur some education expense a few years down the road, but it's not going to happen anytime really soon, we can save for ourselves in a 529 and then take it out without tax consequence, without having to pay taxes if it's used for education. But primarily, usually, it's something that we do for our kids or grandkids, and it can be a great way to help them out, to get started with school, to pay for some tuition or something like that to get them going. Okay, lots of plans like that, really easy to find out information on them. All right, then we've got americasaves.org. We've got 5 savings tips. These are some common themes that we've talked about. You save automatically, you automate it, you automate it, you automate it. We've talked about this almost every single week. The more you automate your savings program, the more successful you will be. It will force you, if it's automated, it will hopefully force you, I should say. It doesn't have to force you, but hopefully it will force you and make it easier to be consistent. If you're consistent with your savings program, you'll have success. The easiest way to make something consistent is to not think about it, to make it something that happens automatically. Make sure that you can cover emergencies. So make sure that, instead of skipping to something that looks exciting like a mutual fund that has a really good return and good track record and takes a lot of risk, instead of jumping to that step, perhaps we, again, take the Ramsey approach and make sure we've got our emergency reserve, make sure we've got our 3 to 6, even as much as 9 months worth of expenses sitting in cash, ready to go if anything were to happen. Because any other savings program will get blown up, will absolutely get blown up if we don't have an emergency reserve. So let's say we skip to a Roth IRA or skip to a 401k or skip to saving in precious metals or skip to saving in stocks or something like that. And then something bad happens and we got to replace our car, or we got to replace a roof, or we got to take care of some health care issues, or we got to take care of a family emergency of some kind. Life will happen. We will have financial emergencies. We absolutely have got to have an emergency reserve, or it'll blow up any kind of savings program that we've done because we weren't prepared. Make sure your savings program or savings, one of the tips is about bad debt. First of all, budget, live within your means, don't get into bad debt. But if you're in bad debt, have a rapid pay down strategy, where you are putting every extra effort you possibly can and getting rid of that bad debt. Bad debt will suck the excess income out of your monthly, budget quickly. If you're paying 20 or 25% interest on a payday loan, or even more on a payday loan, or 20 or 25% interest on a credit card, it makes it very difficult to make progress for savings because you're paying almost all your discretionary income in some cases out in interest. Talk about making sure you do something from a retirement planning standpoint. We've talked about that a little bit. Make sure and plan. And we talk in other classes about planning and what you do to plan, but you've probably heard of the SMART technique as far as goals are concerned, where you want to make sure that goals are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and they have some timetable to them. This is absolutely true when it comes to our financial goals. If we're trying to pay off a certain amount of debt, or if we're trying to get to $1 million, like we talked about, or if we're trying to get some retirement goal, if we haven't put a date on it, if we haven't put a timeline on it, and if we don't have these specific, measurable, achievable, and relevant ties to the goals that we're making, our success rate, our ability to follow through, be disciplined, and be successful, living the way we have to live, being frugal, to get to that goal is highly unlikely. It's likely that we won't achieve our goal if they don't follow kind of this SMART technique that we're looking at there. Okay. All right, and then we've got an America Saves site. The America Saves site is kind of interesting. It's a program that they've got around the country where they basically bring small groups together and act as kind of a financial coaches or they kind of cheerlead each other. It's kind of like an AA for finances, basically, which is great because you get together, you keep each other accountable, you talk about issues and challenges, and then you try to help each other and motivate each other to make better choices. And there's a lot of power in having peer support and peer pressure for good. And in this case, there was a lot of stories from this America Saver stories I thought that were very inspiring. So I'd encourage you to read through some of those because some of them are just really, really neat. People who basically go from nothing financially to something, and they feel different, about their lives when they have, again, their financial house in order. Somebody who had a goal to have home ownership, but didn't know if that was ever going to be a possibility. Kind of put a plan together and was able to get there. Just financial fitness, making sure that we're again financially fit and have our finances together. So there are these different programs. There might be one in your local community or city, or one that you could even start through this americasaves.org, and could be a great program to help you, but also maybe to find an opportunity to mentor and to help others as well. Making, again, baby steps like we all are to make progress when it comes to our finances. AICPA, which is, again, feedthepig.org group, but also the Association of Certified Public Accountants. They have this 360 degrees of financial literacy, and they've got a lot of different topics and calculators and tools that you can use to make progress. So in closing, there's just some things as far as savings that might make sense. Whenever I'm creating a strategy, a financial strategy for a client, when I sit down with a client, we are always segmenting out their strategy based on time frame. So usually it goes into three buckets, three different segments, three different tranches. One is the short term, one is the mid-range, and one is the long term. Usually long term has to do with retirement planning, future retirement planning. Usually mid-term has to do with large purchases like education planning for their kids, the next car, the next home, the second home, the big vacation. Those kinds of things happen in that second tier. And the first tier has more to do with emergency reserves and money that's earmarked for large purchases in the short term. And so if you can tier out or segment out the different goals that you have, come up with specific numbers on the goals that you're trying to accomplish in each one of those tiers, and then make sure and save towards those. The short-term tier needing to probably be in savings or CDs. The mid-term tier might be able to be in bonds or some kind of income-focused, investment of some kind. And then the final tier can be in growth-focused investments. But if you break it down by time frame, it'll help you to allocate the type of investments that fit, what it is that you're trying to accomplish in the time frame that you have. So anyway, we'll end with that. It's been a great course, good material. I hope you've all taken something from it. If you have any questions or concerns, get right in touch with me. If you have any concerns or questions just about finances in general, personal finance, money management, investments, anything like that, I'd encourage you to feel comfortable being in touch with me. It doesn't even need to be related to the course. I'm happy to help. Best of luck to all of you. You'll see grades from week 3 by the morning, probably by tonight, but at least by tomorrow morning. And so you'll have a really good indication 3/4 of the way through the course of where you're at and how you're doing. But please, please, please go back through and make sure you've got all the posts that you were supposed to have so that I can give you some additional points for some of you who are missing some of your discussion board posts. So have a great night, and we'll talk to you soon.